Sometimes, the greatest turning points in life don't come from running faster, pushing harder, or forcing your way through the noise. Sometimes, the moment that changes everything is the moment you finally stop. The world teaches you to keep moving, keep hustling, keep achieving. But nobody tells you that silence can be more powerful than speed, and stillness can reveal more truth than struggle ever will. Today, I want to remind you of something you may have forgotten. You don't always need to chase peace. Sometimes, you need to invite it. When you choose to pause, even for a brief moment, something profound begins to shift inside you. In a world that constantly demands movement, reaction, and productivity, the act of stopping becomes a form of rebellion, a gentle but powerful reminder that you are more than the noise around you. Pausing is not simply a break from activity, it is a doorway back to yourself. It allows you to step out of the expectations placed upon you and step into a space where you can hear your own voice again. Most people spend their lives moving so fast that they begin to lose sight of who they are. They wake up running, they fall asleep exhausted, and in between, their thoughts are shaped by everything except their own truth. But when you pause, the fog starts to clear. You begin noticing the thoughts that were buried under stress, the feelings you ignored because you were too busy to understand them, the desires that you've silenced out of fear or obligation. Pausing reconnects you with the person behind all the roles you play, the real you, the one who has been patiently waiting for your attention. As life accelerates, you start to function on autopilot, responding to situations without depth, making decisions without reflection, and living days that feel repetitive and disconnected. The mind becomes cluttered, the heart becomes heavy, and the soul becomes distant. That distance grows slowly, almost silently, until one day you realize you no longer recognize the person you've become. But a moment of stillness has the power to bridge that distance instantly. When you pause, you stop absorbing everything around you and finally begin listening within. You start noticing the tension in your breath, the tightness in your thoughts, the emotions you've been holding on to without even realizing it. You become aware of how long you've been operating in survival mode and how deeply you've longed for clarity. This awareness is the beginning of reconnection, an invitation to return home to yourself. In that space of stillness, your mind settles enough to reveal what truly matters. You begin separating your own desires from the desires of others. You begin recognizing which dreams are yours and which were handed to you by society, family, or comparison. You start to remember what brings you peace, what gives you energy, and what feels authentic. And the more you reconnect with yourself, the easier it becomes to make decisions that honor your truth instead of decisions that merely satisfy expectations. You begin seeing that every time you ignored your inner voice, it wasn't because it was silent. It was because the world was too loud. Pausing lowers the volume of that world so your inner guidance can finally be heard again. This reconnection gives you strength, not by adding anything new to you, but by allowing what was already inside you to rise to the surface. Your confidence begins to rebuild, not from external praise, but from internal alignment. Your choices become more intentional because they come from clarity rather than pressure. And slowly, the weight you were carrying begins to lift, because you are no longer moving in a direction that contradicts who you are. Pausing brings you back to yourself, and from that moment, every step you take forward carries a deeper purpose, a stronger foundation, and a more honest reflection of who you were always meant to be. When you finally allow yourself to slow down, you begin to see things that were invisible in the rush. Chaos has a way of blinding you, filling your mind with noise, urgency, and emotion until you can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is simply a reaction. But when you pause, even for a moment, the dust begins to settle. The problems that felt impossible start revealing their true size. The emotions that felt overwhelming begin to soften, and the situations that seemed confusing suddenly show their hidden edges and intentions. Stillness doesn't magically solve everything, but it gives you the clarity that chaos steals from you. It shows you which battles matter and which ones drain you. It shows you the difference between a temporary challenge and a long-term truth. And most importantly, it shows you what you've been missing while trying to hold everything together. In chaos, you react. In stillness, you understand. The pace of life often forces you into immediate answers, quick decisions, and emotional responses that don't align with who you truly are. But when you pause, you give yourself permission to observe instead of react. You begin to notice patterns, habits you've fallen into, responsibilities you never questioned, and fears that have shaped your choices far more than you realized. You see how much of your mental energy has been consumed by worries that never deserved your attention. You start recognizing how much peace you sacrificed for things that brought you no real value. This awareness is not always comfortable, but it is always liberating because it gives you back control over your mind. Stillness reveals truths that chaos hides, not because the truth suddenly appears, but because you finally become calm enough to see it. When your mind stops racing, your intuition becomes louder. When your emotions are no longer swirling, your logic becomes sharper. When your heart is no longer overwhelmed, your wisdom rises to the surface. Answers you spent weeks searching for suddenly feel obvious. Decisions you avoided begin to make sense. The direction you were unsure about becomes clear, not because the world changed, but because you changed the way you looked at it. That is the quiet power of a pause. It acts like a mirror, reflecting back the truth without distortion. You also begin to see the people around you more clearly. In chaos, you often assume intentions, misread actions, and react from instinct rather than understanding. But stillness allows you to see through the surface. To notice who drains your energy, who brings out your best, who respects your boundaries, and who harms your peace. You begin to understand relationships in a way that rushing never allowed. You start recognizing which connections are built on mutual respect and which are built on emotional dependency or convenience. This clarity helps you protect your heart, your energy, and your future. Most importantly, stillness reveals the path ahead, not because it magically appears, but because you finally step out of the fog long enough to notice it. Chaos makes the world feel like a maze. Stillness shows you where the walls truly are. Chaos tells you that you're lost. Stillness reminds you that you are always capable of finding your way. In the quiet, you realize that the clarity you've been searching for outside was waiting inside all along. When you learn to pause, you begin to understand that peace was never something you had to chase. It was something you had to make space for. In the constant motion of life, you become conditioned to believe that fulfillment comes from doing more, achieving more, pushing harder, and never slowing down. The world convinces you that if you stop, you'll fall behind, miss opportunities, or lose momentum. But the truth is the opposite. When you pause, even briefly, you reclaim the ability to think, to feel, to breathe, and to reconnect with yourself. Peace isn't found in running. It's found in the moments when you choose to be present enough to feel your own existence. Those quiet seconds become anchors that steady your mind, soften your heart, and remind you that life is not just about speed, it's about awareness. A pause becomes a doorway, one that leads you back to yourself. When you step through it, you discover how much you've ignored your own needs while trying to meet the expectations of the world. You notice the tension in your body that you've carried for years without questioning. You feel the emotional exhaustion you've brushed aside in the name of responsibility. You realize how much pressure you have silently endured, believing it was normal. This awareness is powerful because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You start to understand that the constant rush wasn't strength, it was a distraction. And in that moment of recognition, peace begins to enter. It doesn't crash in loudly, it settles gently, filling the spaces where stress once lived. In the stillness, you begin to listen to yourself more deeply. You hear the quiet thoughts beneath the noise, the ones you've ignored because life never slowed down enough for you to explore them. You hear your true desires, not the ones shaped by comparison or expectations. You hear the worries that were buried under busyness, calling for attention. And you hear the whispers of intuition that were drowned out by urgency. This inner voice becomes clearer the more you pause, guiding you with a sense of calm certainty that no amount of rushing could ever provide. It becomes a compass, pointing you toward choices that feel aligned, relationships that feel safe, and paths that feel true to who you are becoming. A pause also teaches you resilience in a new way. When you are constantly moving, every obstacle feels bigger because you never have time to understand it. But when you pause, challenges stop being crises and start becoming problems you can navigate. You begin to see solutions you couldn't recognize before. You realize that some things you feared weren't as dangerous as they seemed, and some things you clung to weren't as meaningful as you believed. The clarity that emerges in stillness strengthens your ability to handle adversity with calmness rather than panic. You move from reacting to responding, from resisting to understanding, from being overwhelmed to being grounded. And perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries is that peace doesn't require perfect circumstances. It doesn't demand that life be easy or that challenges disappear. Peace grows when you create moments of stillness in the middle of your imperfections. It builds when you breathe through uncertainty rather than trying to outrun it. It expands when you allow yourself to feel without judgment and rest without guilt. In these moments, peace becomes less of a distant goal and more of a natural state, something you can access whenever you choose to step out of the noise and return to the quiet space within yourself.